Hey guys, I'm very excited to have a special guest here on the channel today. Dr. George Wolfe is Professor Emeritus at Ball State University, where he taught saxophone performance and chamber music for 32 years. He's performed extensively throughout the United States and around the world. Wolfe has appeared as a soloist with the Royal Symphonic Band of the Belgian Air Force, the United States Navy Band, the Saskatoon Symphony, the World Band at Disney World, the Chautauqua Motet Choir, the Indianapolis Symphonic Band, and the Medalist Concert Band in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Critics have praised his playing as, quote, brilliant and moving, end quote. John Lambert, writing in the Winston-Salem Spectator, describes Wolfe's performance as, quote, a deeply satisfying and moving artistic experience, end quote. Dr. Wolfe holds a performer's certificate from Indiana University, where he studied with Eugene Rousseau and Daniel Defaillet. He's featured on 8 volumes of the compact disc series, America's Millennium Tribute to Adolphe Sax. He's presented masterclasses at the Paris Conservatory, Indiana University, and the Interlochen Center for the Arts. And he's taught as an artist in residence at Arizona State University, Klagenfurt Conservatory in Klagenfurt, Austria, the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, and the University of San Jose in Costa Rica. He's the recipient of an Open Fellowship Award from the Lilly Endowment to study Hindustani music in New Delhi, India, and at the Ali Akbar College of Music in San Rafael, California. In 1997, Ball State University awarded Wolfe its Outstanding Creative Endeavor Award for his CD entitled Lifting the Veil. As you can see, George Wolfe has had a very long and distinguished career. I studied saxophone performance at Ball State University, and Dr. Wolfe was my saxophone teacher. Among his many talents, I think Dr. Wolfe is a brilliant soprano saxophonist, and I've invited him to share some of his wisdom about that instrument in this video. So without further ado, I present Dr. George Wolfe.
Well, it's great to be here in Las Vegas. I really appreciate Eddie Rich inviting me. It's nice to see him again as a former student of mine. It's also just nice to be in the area and just kind of absorb all the great musical vibes around here. I thought I'd talk today about the soprano saxophone and some of the problems that people have when they first start playing the soprano saxophone after having played the alto or the tenor or the baritone saxophone for a number of years. That's usually the way it happens. People pick up the soprano after they've played alto or tenor for a few years. And they run into some problems in response and intonation when they pick up the soprano. And part of the reason for that is that the soprano saxophone mouthpiece is smaller, as you can see, than the alto or the tenor. And when you move from alto or tenor to soprano saxophone, you're used to that larger feel of the mouthpiece, of the alto or tenor saxophone mouthpiece in the mouth. And so the tendency is to inadvertently take in too much mouthpiece when you play on the soprano. And that gives rise to some response problems and intonation problems, which really can be quite frustrating. The response problem often happens in the upper register in the palm keys. And what usually happens is when you play up high there, you often get an undertone. So here's the way the palm key should sound. But when we first start, we may find that this happens. You may find you get that kind of a squawk, which is really what we call an undertone. And that can be quite frustrating and may take several weeks to get rid of that. So one way to solve that problem is to remember you really have to take in a smaller amount of mouthpiece because it's a smaller mouthpiece. And it can't feel like a tenor or an alto saxophone. It has to feel uniquely, it has to be uniquely proportioned for the soprano mouthpiece, which is smaller. And as I say, I had this problem when I first started playing soprano, and my teacher at the time was Eugene Rousseau, who taught at Indiana University. I was his graduate assistant at the time. He gave me an exercise that really helped cure that problem, and I'd like to illustrate it and demonstrate it now. What he did is told me to play with short bursts of notes using a breath attack. And that would just be like you'd say, ha, 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 ha. And you play the notes 4 at a time using just a breath attack. What you'll find is when you first just try to do that, you'll find you'll get the undertone. It'll sort of sound like that, which is rather uncomfortable you're listening to and also playing. So by using the breath to play the notes only in short bursts of air, it helps find where the proper embouchure setting should be and the proper oral cavity, your throat setting, so that eventually you'll be able to play those notes without the undertone. Then, after you've succeeded in getting a good response with the breath attack, you add the tongue. Now when you add the tongue, that creates another problem because the tongue is up forward to touch the reed, but then it has to get back right away into the throat in order to have the proper oral cavity. And if there's a little delay there, that can bring back the problem of the undertone. So you have to make sure you're aware that the tongue has to be drawn back instantly, actually, after you've touched the reed. So now I'll add the tongue. And it may take a few weeks for you to get that, but that approach, I think you'll find the proper throat position and embouchure position on the smaller mouthpiece of the soprano saxophone so that you can solve that problem. The next exercise that I recommend to help stabilize the embouchure and help you find the proper amount of support on the soprano as compared to the alto and the tenor is an octave leap exercise, which I recommend warming up with. Everybody should warm up with this exercise. And it starts on an F sharp and then goes down chromatically. So you'll notice that when if you look carefully in which my embouchure, you'll notice my jaw isn't moving. I'm not adjusting from one register to the other. What students often make the mistake of doing is they move the jaw. And they have trouble because you can't move the jaw fast enough in order to play the 16th notes when you get to a faster rhythm. So if this is really a test to see what the proper support is for the embouchure. If the embouchure is too tight, then you're going to get this effect. You're going to get a delay, or you might not get the lower note at all because the embouchure is too tight. If the embouchure is too loose, then you'll get a disproportionately loud sound on the lower note. it'll sound very difficult to control. It'll sound very out of tune. So, but with the proper amount of support, then you can get both registers without having to change the embouchure, and the octave key will be doing all the work. Of course, there are times when you want to manipulate the embouchure to play in a particular style. A commercial style or a jazz style often uses that, and it becomes necessary. The problem is that sometimes people get in such a habit of doing that they lose the stability of the embouchure, and thus their intonation suffers and their response suffers in other contexts. So if I play something in a jazz style, you'll notice that my manipulating my embouchure to create that style. So you notice that a lot of changes were going on to bend the notes, to add style to that particular song, which was sometimes, as people will say, we're in love from the movie, from the Broadway show Oklahoma. But you want to come back and reset the embouchure as you warm up, and with that octave leap exercise. So even though I can add all those inflections, I can go back and play that warm-up exercise. So I hope you found these tips useful, and I thank you for tuning in and listening to this little demonstration, and wish you all the best in your pursuit of saxophone performance. Thank you.
I have to give a special thanks to George Wolfe for sharing his insight and wisdom with us in this video. The exercises he shared are particularly useful for the soprano saxophone, but they're helpful on any of the other saxophones as well. You can download a free PDF of the exercises Dr. Wolfe showed us on my website. There's a link in the description below. Also, be sure to check out George Wolfe's YouTube channel. He has audio and video recordings of performances from throughout his 50-year career. They run the gamut from Baroque transcriptions and staples of the classical saxophone repertoire to 21st century post-classical improvisation. It's definitely worth checking out, and there's a link in the description. If you found this video to be helpful, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.